Mr. Mike Steele to lead us in the pledge.
Stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Awards and recognitions. Dr. Register.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the audience. I've asked Michael Steele to come forward to say some words about two of his staff members who are being recognized tonight with a proclamation from Governor Bill Haslam. Well-deserved proclamation, and I'll do the presentation, but I can't do justice to the description of why they're getting this recognition, so I'll ask Principal Steele to do this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, school board and members. Jeff Davis and Ms. Cruz, Sonia Cruz, if you'll come up. About 2 months ago, just before Thanksgiving, Mr. Davis and Ms. Cruz were alerted after school when students were walking home. The building was clear, the buses had already left. Mr. Davis was alerted and Ms. Cruz was alerted to the fact that a student was having a seizure in the parking lot. The seizure was seen by a bus driver and who also responded to the scene. And during that time, Mr. Davis got there and realized that the young lady had stopped breathing. Mr. Davis and Ms. Cruz administered CPR, and they got her breathing again, but then she flatlined once again in the parking lot. Mr. Davis and Ms. Cruz continued with CPR. She flatlined 3 more times on the way to the hospital before they finally saved her life, and she's back at school now doing very, very well. Is she here? Yes. She's here. Come here.
Stand up. Let me look at you.
So we're just really proud of Mr. Davis and Ms. Cruz and you as well, and so just very thankful to God that you're alive and that these well-trained folks were there to administer CPR and save your life, and that's something I'm very, very proud of. Yeah.
So usually I say it's my, by the authority given me by the governor, I hereby award you a diploma for graduation, but that's not what we're doing tonight. So let me read this. This is a state of Tennessee, and I'll read it one time, but to each of you. State Capitol, by Bill Haslam, Governor, by virtue of the authority vested in me, I hereby confer upon Jeffrey Davis this certificate of appreciation in recognition of outstanding service in the best interests and the highest traditions of the state of Tennessee. Given under my hand in the Great Seal of the state of Tennessee in Nashville this 11th day of December 2014, signed by the Governor, Bill Haslam. So, let's do that. Congratulations. And would you like to say anything? And young lady, would you like to say something? No? Okay, please.
Oh, okay. Well,
stand right over here at the mic, please.
Thank you. Yes. I have to say that, for everything we do, testing, retesting, crunching data, having parent conferences, student conferences, teacher conferences, so on and so forth, when something like this happens, it puts everything into perspective. It kind of makes you sit back and think of what is important, and it's loving these kids, and it's taking care of these kids day in and day out. I said a while back when it first happened, I said that we were working with the same urgency as if she were our own daughter, and that's the honest truth. I believe these educators in these schools believe that same thing, and I'm really honored to work for Metro Nashville Public Schools, and I do have the most supportive principal in the district, by the way. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to call anybody, but he did this and for our benefit. And I'm so happy that you're with us. I'm so happy you're here, and I'm so happy my family's here too. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I told Kennedy that she was our Christmas miracle, and she's our Christmas miracle and our New Year's baby. And I'm glad she's here, and I'm glad we could help her.
Amen. Miss Pierce, you're next. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we have our And the Good News Is segment, and this is being sponsored by Ms. Pierce. Ms. Pierce, will you introduce our guests?
Sure. I'd like to call Dr. Jamie Jenkins and coaches Lopez and Murphy from the Hillsborough High School football team. The team had an incredible season, went all the way to Division I 5A state championship ball game, and they're here to tell us about their incredible season and also some exciting futures for some of their players. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us. Good evening, Madam Chair, Board Member Pierce, other board members, Dr. Register. My name is Dr. Jenkins. I'm the principal of the Academy of International Business and Global Communications at Hillsborough High School. On behalf of our faculty and our awesome principal, Terry Schrader, it's an honor that we're here to celebrate the 2014 Hillsborough High School football team. But while I have you here, I would like to mention just a few other really cool things going on at our school right now. This past fall, our arts department did a fantastic play on Orwell's 1984, and this spring they'll be doing Hairspray. So certainly if you have a chance, come out and check us out. Our kids are phenomenal. Our arts department currently has an exhibition at both the Frisk Center and at Belmont. We also have 4 students right now who are, let me find my information here, sorry, because I don't want to mispronounce any of this stuff. 4 merit scholars right now. We have 4 merit scholars and 1 student who was selected an Intel scholar as well. So we have some pretty cool things going on. Athletically, we've already had 4 student athletes who have received scholarships this year. Abby McCullough in cross country will be going to UT. We have Michael Hughes, who will also be going to UT. We have, Michael Hughes will be going to Tennessee State. We have Kyle Phillips, who will be going to UT. And then we also have 1 other student who will be going to University of Alabama, and that's Janelle Pate for track. Now, to the matter at hand, I have with me tonight Coach Lopez, who's our defensive coordinator, and 2 of our students, Shandon Mays and Vincent Perry, who is verbally actually committed to UT also. So we have some pretty phenomenal athletes this year. But our season was a perfect season, 10-0 during the regular season, and we played some pretty tough teams, including Overton and McGavick, who were both also playoff qualifiers and gave us a pretty good challenge during the regular season. In the first round of the playoffs, we defeated Kenwood 55-12. Then we moved on to the second round and beat Springfield 41-7. After that, we went to Shelbyville, where we beat Shelbyville 42-9. And then we traveled to Memphis, and it was cold that night. I was at that game, and it was not fun for the spectators to sit there in the cold, but we had a great time watching our team dismantle the team from Memphis. And then, of course, that moved us on to the state championship, where we were fighting some serious elements. We have a very balanced team, passing and running attack, and the weather that night was not our friend. Any of you who was able to tune into that game saw that the rain was coming in sideways. We had on full rain gear that night, so we didn't quite pull that one out. But on a dry field, I think we would have taken that. In fact, I know we would have taken that game. Hopefully anybody not offended by that. But we would have won that game. I also like to mention that one of our players, too, was named Defensive Player of the Game, and he was one of my students in my academy, and that was Jonathan Young, so we're very proud of him as well for being chosen Defensive Player of the championship game. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for having us here to celebrate the success of our football team, and we're just extremely proud of our coaches and our students. They're fantastic. I mean, we have real scholar athletes, and they're just upstanding kids in the building as well as on the football field, and we're just extremely, extremely proud of them. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you need need a security escort for all that smack talk, I mean, we got one we can borrow. Okay, next we'll have public participation. When Ms. Bobo gets ready, we have those that have asked to appear before the board. I just want to remind you that you have 3 minutes. 3 minutes to make your remarks. At the end of those 3 minutes, you will hear, let me get the bell ready. There you go. That's the sound, and we will ask you to step away from the mic so that the next person can come forward. I'm going to ask that Chris Reynolds, Jory Smith, and Carolyn Cantwell come to the mic, and then following them, John Haubenreich, Joshua Harris, and Jessica Woods.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Chris Reynolds. I'm the CEO of Lead Public Schools here in Nashville. And board members, MNPS staff, members of the community, thank you for the opportunity to address you in the public comment section. Our mission at Lead is to support, train, and educate the next generation of responsible citizens, and we're committed to pursuing this mission in partnership with MNPS and the communities we serve. We know our successes at our 2 conversion schools, Cameron College Prep and Brick Church College Prep, are also your successes, and we're honored to be able to continue our work there in our other locations as well. Briefly, I want to remind you, Lead Public Schools was started in 2007, and partnership was one of our founding principles. Nashville is different than many states. We have a really thriving charter sector here that partners with the district and serves a comparable number of special education students, students with English language challenges. We provide transportation, not just at Lead, but across the charter sector. And these things seem normal and they seem typical, but in other states, that's not always the case. And so I want to mention that in 2007, Lead and some other charter schools that started this work here in Nashville were committed to that, and I believe it has borne fruit across the district. In addition, we partnered with the district in 2011 on the Cameron College Prep transformation, and that is a phase-in, phase-out transformation project that has been piloted at Brick as well, and we're very pleased with that success. That school has received reward status. In addition, the 8th grade operated under MNPS was also a reward school. It's among the most ethnically diverse schools in the city, and we have had a 30% increase in families choosing that zone school that had previously been opting out 4 years prior, and we're very proud to bring families back to a neighborhood school. We continued this partnership at Brick Church in serving a zoned enrollment population with arguably, I would have to defer to the experts here, Mr. Changus, but I believe Brick Church had the highest special education population in the city for several years, the first 2 years that we operated it. We developed a life skills program. We continue to provide transportation for all students, and we're very pleased to be partnering on a continued basis at Brick Church. In 2011, while we embarked on the Cameron College Prep Partnership, we also submitted a charter application for Lead Prep Southeast, and before we submitted that, we came to MNPS and we met with Student Assignment and we asked them, and this was prior to the school board, all of you moving on a policy a year ago to steer charter applicants in a strategic fashion to parts of the city where they were needed the most. And we sought the advice of Student Assignment and Dr. Coverstone and Carol Swan's team on where we should
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I appreciate your being here.
And we're pleased to continue that work.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Smith? I'm sorry, Jory Smith. It may not be a Mr. Carolyn Cantwell?
Yes. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I don't have a title other than volunteer in the community, so I hope you, what I have to say is helpful to you. My husband and I have lived in the Nashville community for 30 years, and for 13 of those years, we have worked as a volunteer among the refugee populations in Nashville. We teach English as a learned language. We tutor children after school. We help families with school issues, and we also help the adults find employment. But one of our favorite things to do is to help children enroll in any KIPP school we can find. And this is because we know that at KIPP, the children, our refugee children in particular, will flourish. They flourish because the learning environment at KIPP encourages curiosity, respect for self and others, and a continued commitment to serious learning. The teachers go above and beyond the norm, making themselves available well after the typical school day is over, to the students with homework help, and also to the parents for any questions they may have about the children's school performance. I'll never forget what one child said on the phone to me a few months after he was enrolled for his first year, which was 5th grade at KIPP. I said, "Hassan, how do you like school?" And without a stop, he said, "I love learning." And that's a real testimony to the fact that KIPP supports a real strong learning environment. Even yesterday, we were visiting with a refugee family that's currently zoned for Kirkpatrick. And while the mom is very grateful, so grateful for the strong relationships that have been formed between her children and the teachers and faculty at Kirkpatrick, she acknowledged that the scores of the Kirkpatrick children were, in her words, low. She's heard from her neighbors whose children have gone to KIPP schools how much their children are learning. She wants the same for her children. What parent would not? We know several refugee families whose children are zoned for Kirkpatrick. And let me give you a little bit of background. These refugees come from an environment of persecution and hardship in a country where they were forbidden to go to school. So the parents have a very strong stake in seeing that their kids get educated. They tell us that education is the key to success. These are the kinds of children who would make the most of their opportunity to attend a KIPP school. The fact that KIPP is collaborating with Kirkpatrick will mean that we now have a neighborhood KIPP school that's in close proximity to the families' homes where their children would go to school. This means a lot because many low-income families and many of our refugee parents do not drive. This would enable them, therefore, with a neighborhood KIPP school, to be able to move back and forth between the home and school and participate in their children's academic lives more helpfully. Finally, my husband and I are eager to see the many positive changes that a KIPP and Kirkpatrick collaboration will have on the families that are zoned for this school. From our experience with KIPP Academy Nashville and KIPP Collegiate Prep, those positive changes have the potential to last a lifetime. I urge you to vote in favor of the proposed collaboration between these two schools.
Thank you, Ms. Cantwell. Thank you. John Haubenreich?
Good evening. I want to talk for just a minute tonight about community collaboration and community engagement. Specifically, I know you all are voting on the Kirkpatrick issue tonight, and this sort of plays into that. But I wanted to start by saying I think we all recognize that our strongest schools that we have in Nashville are the ones in which the parents and the teachers and the community are most actively involved and engaged. And I think that's true for zone schools and charter schools and magnet schools. You really see strength in community and strength in schools where you have that kind of engagement. And I know that's been something we've talked a lot about, especially in context of the East Nashville plan and getting more parents involved and having public meetings. And now we have this advisory committee that I'm one of the members serving on, and we have a couple other members in the audience today. And these are all steps in the right direction. We talked about in our last meeting specific turnaround strategies and what to do about our schools. And I threw out a big idea. And I emailed all you folks about this the day afterwards and attached a white paper about it. But the big idea is something called local school councils. This is an idea that actively and substantively engages the community, parents, community members, teachers, principal, everybody surrounding a school, actively and substantively engages those folks in the school. If we're going to make it a priority in Nashville to build strong, not just strong schools, but strong communities around these schools, this is a way to put our money where our mouth is and to say, we're not just going to sort of broadly encourage community organizations, if you have some time to volunteer, come volunteer at the school. This is a way to actively build in community engagement. You see it in Chicago. The state of Georgia has mandated one of these in every single school in the state of Georgia. You see this in New York, where they have broader sort of district level schools. And so I want to pitch this idea to you as a school board to think about. We're talking about it in East Nashville, and I think it's something worth considering as a way to really involve the community in our schools. And I just want to point out a couple of things about it. You saw the structure in what I gave you. I think we've seen a problem that this is the solution to. The problem that we see, and frankly, I'll just say it in all candor, I think it's been a problem in this Kirkpatrick conversation. There was not a lot of community engagement and involvement beforehand. We have school turnaround teams, but there haven't been a lot of engagement with those. This is a way to really fix that problem. I know that a lot of the funding that we're using to do these school turnarounds are school improvement grant funding. You look at the school improvement grants, one of the things it specifically asks about is how do you design and innovate with community engagement? And I would submit that this is a way to do that. I'm out of time, but I would love to follow up with you if and when we have time and you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Harris?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Really quickly, I won't need the full 3 minutes. My name is Joshua Harris. I'm here to speak on behalf of the KIPP Metro collaboration at Kirkpatrick. I have 6 children in Metro schools, ranging from 1st to 8th grade, and I'll have a kindergartner next year. My main concern is that my children are being properly taught and that the teachers actually care for the children. I've recently enrolled 4 of my children into KIPP Middle School on Douglas, I believe, and although they've only been there for a week, going on 2 weeks, but I can already tell a difference in their attitude for school, and I like it, and I think that they do too. I personally like KIPP. I like what it stands for. I like their family values and their team spirit. With that being said, I feel that the collaboration of KIPP at Kirkpatrick is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jessica Woods?
Hello, I'm actually not Jessica Woods, I'm Jory Smith, but I would also like to speak on the collaboration of KIPP at Kirkpatrick. I actually volunteered at KIPP on Douglas, at the one on Ewing Lane. My boyfriend works there, and I have a child that goes to Kirkpatrick. She will be in 2nd grade next year, and I have a son who will be in pre-K next year. So I am very excited that my kids will be able to join the KIPP program, even though they will not be able to join this coming up school year, but I'm looking forward to them being able to do it in the future. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I'm sorry. I met Ms. Galloway a couple weeks ago at the parent meeting at Kirkpatrick, and I was very impressed by her. She is very enthusiastic about becoming the principal at KIPP at Kirkpatrick, and I love the fact that she is very parent-oriented. She wants to get the parents involved, and I think that is the best thing for Kirkpatrick in that area, is for the parents to get more involved in their child's education. Therefore, they will want to be more involved in their education so they can prosper and move forward with their education in their continuing years. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, moving into governance issues, the consent agenda. Ms. Kim?
All right. A, the approval of minutes, 9/23/2014 regular meeting. B, the recommended award of contract for architectural services for library renovations at McGavick and Overton High Schools, Street Dixon Rick Architecture PLC. C, recommended award of contract for HVAC renovations at Bailey Middle School, Advanced Mechanical Contractors Incorporated. D, recommended approval of change order number 1 for John Early Middle School renovations, Cardin Construction Incorporated. E, recommended approval of change order number 2 for Granbury Elementary School additions, Orion Construction Corporation. F, recommended approval of change order number 6 for Hume Fogg Magnet High School Gymnasium addition, DF Chase Incorporated. G, recommended approval of request number 3 for instrument storage cabinets, Hume Fogg Magnet High School, Wenger Corporation. H, recommended approval of request number 21 for district-wide maintenance, repairs, and general construction, DuPont Tyler Cafeteria alterations, Southland Constructors, LLC. I, recommended approval of request number 22 for district-wide maintenance, repairs, and general construction, New Overton Cluster Elementary School, Southland Constructors, LLC. J, awarding of purchases and contracts. 1, alignment, Nashville. 2, Annenberg Institute for School Reform, 3, California Creative Solutions, 4, Claim Technologies, 5, Earthwalk Communications, 6, Imagination Specialties Incorporated, DBA Imagination Branding, 7, Industrial Fire and Safety, 8, Knowledge Academies, 9, Mass Insight Education, 10, McGrath Training Systems, 11, My Student Survey, 12, Procter & Graves Service Company, 13, Rocketship Education, 14, Sexual Assault Center, 15, Southeast Marketing Group, DBA Sportswear Express, 16, STEM Prep Academy, 17, Tennessee Department of Education, 18, The New Teacher Project, 19, Tyco Simplex Grinnell, 20, Valor Collegiate Academy. K, recommended approval of lease agreement with East End Preparatory Charter School for use of space in the Dalewood School Building. L, recommended approval of a request for compulsory attendance waiver. And M, legal settlement claim C-32027 for $20,000.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. I get a motion to approve. Thank you. I have a move and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 2, approval of KIPP conversion at Kirkpatrick Elementary School.
Madam Chair, we, as all board members know, it's our recommendation to convert Kirkpatrick over the next 4 years to a KIPP elementary school, starting in the 2015-16 school year with grades K and 1 managed by KIPP and grades 2 through 4 managed by Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools. This will be a cooperative partnership, and in keeping with the board-approved charter for a conversion school that the board approved last year. Before the board votes, I'd like to just update you briefly on what's transpired since we announced Kirkpatrick as the preferred school in early December. First, I want to commend Mildred Nelson, the principal at Kirkpatrick, for her positive attitude, her willingness to embrace this partnership, as well as her participation and support of the family engagement efforts that have taken place over the last month. Mildred, would you stand up, please? Thank you so much for your support. I want to emphasize that this is what a charter conversion ought to look like. The collaborative spirit that is developed between Mildred and the leaders at KIPP, and particularly Amy Galloway. Amy, would you stand up, please? Notice that they're sitting together back there. Amy Galloway, who was hired to be the KIPP elementary principals and who has radiated out into the community. There's been really good support of Kirkpatrick families that has been shown for KIPP coming into the school. And I believe this collaboration that we've seen and that we see with these two school leaders is a positive sign of the success that we'll see from this conversion. As you saw in the board packet, the community engagement that has taken place at Kirkpatrick since December has shown very positive response from parents. I just will update some of the numbers that were in the memo. 107 family surveys have now been returned, up from 60 since Thursday of last week. That's about a 50% response rate to the survey, which we're very pleased with. And a complete report on the survey responses have been placed at your places. That's a very good report. I won't go into the details of that unless you have some questions about that. Ms. Galloway has continued her home visit. She's now met with 68 families, up from 53 last week. And of those 68 home visits, 64 families have indicated that they are supportive of the KIPP partnership at Kirkpatrick and have committed to attending the school next year. Two of those families said their support was conditional on Ms. Nelson returning as the Kirkpatrick principal, and that's something that we certainly hope will happen, and have discussed this with Ms. Nelson. And 4 families who are not supportive, 2 of those only have 4th graders at the school, so they will not be returning to the school next year. In addition to the collaboration among the school leaders, the third thing I want to highlight before the board votes is that because of this partnership, we will be giving Kirkpatrick families several high-quality choices next year, and I think this is a really important component of this overall turnaround strategy for Kirkpatrick. In addition to the KIPP School, Explore Preparatory School, another charter school that's being operated in partnership with the Martha O'Brien Center, will open with kindergarten classes next year. Families will also have the choice of receiving transportation to Lockland Elementary School if they were chosen and they are in the geographic priority zone for Lockland, or Rosebank Elementary School. When we announced Kirkpatrick as the preferred location for the KIPP conversion in December, we did so because we had identified the school as having the greatest need among all the eligible elementary schools. We stand by that recommendation and are pleased to offer the board evidence that this partnership will be a success through the positive way it's been received so far and supported by these school leaders. So we recommend that you approve this conversion tonight.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
I move that we,
Sorry, Ms. Shepherd.
okay. I'd like to move that we go ahead and approve the KIPP conversion at Kirkpatrick. Second.
Second, Ms. Brandon. Thank you, Dr. Brandon. Discussion. Ms. Speary.
I just want to say that when we wrote our parameters last year about how we wanted to deploy future charter schools, this was within those parameters, and I congratulate KIPP for stepping up to the plate and doing something that is kind of unheard of. So we appreciate that, and I had the opportunity to meet with Amy Gallagher last week. I was very impressed with her, and she is one of those people that comes to the table with a lot of enthusiasm. She's willing to step out of the box and try new things. She's very familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and realizes that our kids at Kirkpatrick need a lot of opportunities that that wraparound services would provide. So even though I'm not a proponent of the phased-in conversions, and Amy and I had a discussion about that. And the fact that Kirkpatrick is high need, and it's a sense of urgency. There is some consideration about moving forward with the conversion rather than a phased-in conversion. So just to think outside the box is so appreciated, and I wish you great luck with this endeavor.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Mr. Pinkston?
Dr. Register, can you repeat the favorability responses from the Kirkpatrick families?
Yes, let me find those.
While he's looking for those, I'll just say the board, and Ms. Kim, it's your district, so you may have had a different experience, but we have not had a single, that I'm aware of, email, phone call, letter, conversation in opposition to this conversion, other than one or two previous comments at a previous meeting. Have you heard anything different from your end?
So the data that I reported was that 107 family surveys have now been returned, about a 50% success rate, and that all but 4 of those families were positive about the KIPP conversion.
So I think, the previous conversations have not been around to convert or not to convert. I think, generally speaking, when we approved the idea of conversion as a priority, we, as a group, mostly agreed that that was a good thing to consider, that was fiscally and operationally sustainable within where we're trying to take the school system, but we don't want to do hostile, quote-unquote, hostile takeovers. This seems and to have all the stripes of a friendly conversion, and I'm supportive. Like Ms. Sperry, I have some concerns about this phased-in approach. I would like to encourage KIPP to reach and stretch a bit and see if you can do more faster for more students, but just want to reiterate my appreciation for you all bringing a concept that was in keeping with what the board asked for, what the district's stated needs were, and I wish you all the success, and to the Kirkpatrick families as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I can't get your mic on. No, I'm just kidding.
I feel that I can't vote for this conversion on principle because I really see no evidence that conversions are working. And I'd rather see the district make a greater investment in our struggling schools and target them with extra resources. But I do commend KIPP for being willing to take on Kirkpatrick, and I'm pleased to see that both the district and KIPP are engaging the community in the process. I hope, like Mr. Pinkston said, that KIPP will consider a full school conversion or a faster conversion to avoid a long-term location, which I think we've seen is not necessarily good for children or for school climate. And if the conversion does go through tonight, as it appears it will, I hope that this will be an opportunity for some very positive changes at the school, and I wish Ms. Galloway luck in her new position.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe. Any other comments? We're ready for the vote. All in favor of the approval of the KIPP conversion at Kirkpatrick Elementary, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Let me turn your mic back on. Thank you. Motion passes. All right.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the director's report. I'm sorry you didn't ask for it.
That's okay. You go right ahead, sir.
Okay, I'll do it. It's next on the list. The first item that I want to introduce and talk about, and doesn't require a board vote or anything, but it's the district support plans for priority schools. And as you know, we've been working on this for some period of time through the fall and into the winter now for our 12 priority schools in the district. Last week you received a set of reports on the 12 priority schools. The set of reports included a data profile on each school, identifying the greatest challenges that we had seen that those schools had, and also a district support plan for each school, detailing how the district is providing necessary resources to address the school's most immediate needs this school year. There was a cover letter that came with support plans that's very important, which explained how these documents fit into a larger strategy for developing effective multi-year turnaround plans for each of these schools. In other words, the district priority plans that you received, support plans, are intended to be short-term, positive effects that we can make as a district to support the work in helping these schools turn around this year. As we explained back in November when we were talking about this process, we can basically break this down into 4 steps. First, to do the diagnostic for each school. We have done that with the data profiles, and then secondly, to address immediate needs this school year, which are the district support plans that you received. And then thirdly, to identify strong leadership for each of these priority schools. You can't turn schools around if you don't have strong leadership that's got the capacity and the ability to do that. I'll say a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then fourth, to empower those school leaders to develop and implement an effective turnaround plan for their schools and hold them accountable for the results. I hope you've had a chance to review the reports. We worked hard to get those to you a full week in advance, finishing those up over the holidays, and to give you some time to take the information in. In the data profiles, we analyzed a wide range of data. We conducted instructional rounds at each school. That's going into every classroom. That's observing instruction and looking at the setup there. We had a number of people involved in that from the district. It included conducting a SWOT analysis with teachers, school administration, and instructional coaches. We held parent and faculty meetings in all of the schools, and the data that was gleaned from this, the observations, the input, were all taken into account in developing the data profiles. Using what we learned from the diagnostic process I just described, we developed the district support plans. It's important to understand that for most of these schools, the district support plans are intended to be quick actions for the current school year, while the long-term turnaround strategies are still in development and are being developed by their school leaders this spring. This is true except for the 4 priority schools that were originally identified as priority schools in 2011 and are currently in the 3rd year of a 3-year turnaround strategy. These are the I-Zone schools that have already been funded with school improvement grants. For the I-Zone schools, the district support plans document a continuation and fine-tuning of their ongoing turnaround plans. The other 8 priority schools, those that were newly identified this year, will be eligible for school improvement grants this spring, and that's very important. In December, we were awarded a $1.3 million planning grant from the state to support the development of the turnaround plans at these 8 schools and to help prepare them for the submission of a school improvement grant application this spring. Our proposal to the state was largely built off a number of lessons learned from the original list of priority schools and other research that we had done. The overarching theme of these lessons learned is the importance of advanced planning, namely identifying the right turnaround leader and turnaround teams far enough in advance to give them time to plan their turnaround strategy well before the start of the school year. Our school leaders need time to identify their teacher leadership teams, to remove ineffective teachers, and to develop their school designs. The planning grant funds we were awarded will support our early hiring of turnaround leaders and their planning process this spring. As you know, we're conducting a national recruitment campaign. We have done this past fall to find up to 10 turnaround leaders and up to 100 turnaround teachers to staff these schools. We received a good response from that recruitment effort. The application period closed on December 19th. We received 96 applications for the school leader positions. 25% of those passed phase 1 of a 3-phase screening and interview process that's quite rigorous that we have adopted and are using now. Each of these applicants have gone through our new leader screening process, which I just mentioned. We're nearly through interviewing the top school leader candidates, and we expect to be in a position to make decisions about school leadership later this month. It's important to note that not all of our priority schools will be assigned new leaders. We have some really good leaders in a number of these schools. We feel like the right leader is already in place in a number of them and simply need more time and support to achieve greater results. Once we know who will be leading each priority school, though, all of them, in the 2015-16 school year, those principals will have the opportunity to select teachers from the MNPS Turnaround Corps and from our applicant pool to begin building a core team of turnaround teachers in these schools. We expect school leaders to start selecting their candidates from the Turnaround Corps as early as February. The selection of these school leaders will also give us the opportunity to continue the community engagement process with families at each school that we started with our parent meetings this fall. We think this is the right thing to do, but the need for family engagement in the school improvement planning process is detailed in our planning grant. The grant provides resources for specialized training for families to ensure that they are effectively engaged in their children's education. Also, some of the other supports you'll see listed in the district support plans are aligned to the need for advanced planning at each of the 8 newly identified priority schools and the resources we have from the planning grant. For example, you'll notice that several of the district support plans that we list as action steps provide additional administrative support trained in team evaluation to assist in the observation and evaluation of teachers in order to improve the quality of instruction in these schools. Our planning grant includes funds to hire expert team evaluators to assist with evaluations and teacher support. This will help improve the quality of teaching this school year now by having additional support for these teachers and additional feedback. And it's also an important step in ensuring that we have quality teachers filling all of our classrooms in these turnaround schools. The planning grant also includes hiring an external turnaround consultant to assist the school leaders with the development of their school designs and school improvement grant applications. As for the next steps in the 4 priority schools in the I-Zone, which are already undergoing multi-year turnaround plans, each school built their school designs with sustainability in mind. They will work through the newly established budget flexibility process that we're implementing to build their sustainability plans into their local and Title I budgets for next year. It's worth noting that each of these schools improved its outcomes to satisfactory on the academic performance framework this past year. These schools are being expected to meet aggressive achievement targets to keep them on track to exit the priority schools list. While the school level planning we are preparing for is top priority at the district level, we will also be engaging a consultant, Mass Insight, you approved the contract in the consent agenda, to advise us on the organizational structure and school management practices we need in place in the district to support school improvement. It's an evaluation of the central office and support systems that we have, and is a diagnostic process that we will be undergoing over the next couple of months. As we empower our school leaders to develop and implement effective turnaround plans, we must have the right district supports and structure to ensure their success. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about the plans. I will say, for the benefit of the viewing audience, it's about 100, almost a couple of hundred pages of documents detailing the work that's going on in each of these schools. So, Madam Chair, that concludes that part of my director's report.
Okay. Dr. Brannon.
Yes, I would like to ask Dr. Register if any school leaders will be assigned during this school year. I know you said 15, 16, but will there be any?
Yes. We want to engage, if we're bringing people in from the outside, of course, people have obligations in other places, but we are talking to some of these. We're in the process now of engaging these turnaround specialists, and we're talking to some of them about coming on board soon. And for all of them, we want to engage them in coming in and being in the schools, learning the schools if they're new to the school ahead of time, even if it means bringing them in for days at the time to learn the school, to meet the faculty and all of that, to give us a head start. Too many times in the past we put a new principal in a school and it's effective July 1st. Principal walks in July 1st and school starts August 1st. And principal might have 3 or 4 openings, vacancies, and they're behind the 8 ball. So we hope to really give them a head start. We think this is a great advantage, and we'll use the planning grant money to do that, and which works very well for us.
And along those same lines, the new turnaround teacher corps, will any of those be placed this year as well?
Most likely not.
Okay.
However, what we do have planned as a part of the Teacher Turnaround Corps is 11 months of employment. We want to bring in a core team of teachers, identify a core team of teachers in these schools and give them 11 months employment, which means that they will be able to come on board earlier and begin a planning process,
Okay.
which is a real advantage.
Thank you.
Ms. Pierce?
This may be a question for Dr. Steele, but I'll ask, on the teams that went out and did the analysis of the schools, I think it was called the SWATs, when you met with the teachers and leadership, how often was it that you felt like their self-awareness, their analysis of their own school and their own strengths were aligning with what you all saw in your observations?
Yeah, I'll ask Jay and some others who were involved in that process, Alan, to make some responses there. The process is called instructional rounds, and our central office staff and others have been trained in the instructional rounds process. And the schools actually, when the teams go in and do an instructional round and an analysis, they actually debrief with the school faculties before they leave. So there's a good opportunity for discussion about what's seen and what's proposed. But Jake, specifically to that
Sure.
question.
So 3 different things. There's a team that goes in and meets with the core leadership team of the school, which is teachers, coaches, principals, assistant principals, whomever the principal is on the leadership team. That's where the SWOT analysis is done. Then a team of 15 to 18 go in and conduct the instructional rounds going into every classrooms with a very prescribed protocol. And then the third phase is meeting with the faculty to debrief on what they've seen, what the key findings were, or common threads. In most schools, I can't say every school, in most schools, the SWOT analysis was perfectly aligned or very closely aligned with what resulted in the instructional rounds and the common threads that we're seeing. Just a couple things were a lack of rigor and low expectations, and that was common through the SWOT analysis and common in the instructional rounds. Not every school, but most of them, yes, were there. We're in the process now of doing it in most of the 6 to 25% of schools. We began that process today.
Okay, so for the ones that did not align, because there were definitely a couple that really
Right.
jumped out at me, that it was almost like the strengths were the leadership, the quality teaching, the level of rigor. It was kind of your perfect analysis of what you want a school to be. But the round showed something very differently. So I'm at least hopeful that those schools will be ones that have possible changes and some more intentionality there, because obviously the self-awareness is lacking.
Well, the instructional rounds results is actually driving a lot of conversation and work with those principals and the coaches in the building that should permeate into the classrooms. But that is guiding our next phase of work.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Pinkston?
Thank you for the update. I have provided my comments, most of my comments in writing to Dr. Register and Dr. Steele, but I just want to say a word about Whitsitt Elementary, which is in my district. I feel like I have a unique obligation to speak for my constituents. Whitsitt is a school of 544 kids, 65% Latino, 55% English learners, which means there's probably another 15 or 20% of limited English proficiency. I just want to challenge, in a positive way, everyone in leadership and learning, or at least on the elementary side of the house, to do everything that you can to make Whitsitt be everything that it can be. I honestly believe if we can crack the code on English language instruction and leadership in that building, then we can do it anywhere in the school system. And I just want badly to see that happen. And I just want to lob that out as a challenge and a request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Jake, can I ask you a question about the low expectations rigor, the theme that emerged? Can you say a little bit more when you say low expectations and what the intervention then is? I mean, I'm making an assumption about what you mean by low expectations, but but I'd like to hear your...
Sure, and in that particular instance, low expectation is kids coming in at a low level, kids of poverty, kids coming in several grade levels behind, and the expectation is not that they're going to be on or above grade level, that they're teaching down to where the kids are, and not expecting the kids to rise to where they should be. So that work, that was a common thread that you saw throughout the instructional rounds results. And I can't say particularly what that work will look like, because it'll look different in every school based on the leadership team coming together and deciding what their strategies are going to be.
Okay, that's
That
right.
was a
Yeah,
common thread.
I assume that, that was the definition. I mean, just a note on that, just because having worked with a lot of teachers in the past and managed a lot of people, I mean, the power of mindset and expectation, as we know, is everything. Absolutely. Because if you believe, then you will do everything humanly possible, and then outside of it, you will make pleas to God and everyone in between to make sure that your kids learn. If you really believe that your kids are capable, if you don't believe that, it's like a non-starter, in my view. Because then because it's never in your control. I mean, if you actually believe that kids aren't capable, then, it's actually a reasonable then, ergo, why even try? Because it's like you can't control it. And so it feels like in situations where we have lots of challenges, where we know for a fact that we know that expectations drive so much of actual action. Like what goes on up here actually drives everything that happens here with your feet, with your heart, everything. And so I have lots of interest in just understanding then what is the proposed set of interventions when it's resides so much right here. And what's driving even the low expectations, is it more just that they haven't seen kids who are way behind succeed very quickly, given a year of really aggressive and rigorous and joyful instruction? Or is it that it's much more deep-rooted? It's actually not about not knowing what excellence looks like, which is more, skill and being able to witness it and then practicing that and applying that, but more, it's just different. They're not going to be able to just, turn on a skill like that. And so, what nature is it? Because this seems very important in terms of driving the kind of change that we want to see, is having universally a core of leaders who deep in their soul, deep believe against all obstacles, my kids can learn, and therefore I will lead them to where they need to be.
I agree.
But what's the intervention?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? I'm worried that we're going to gloss over that. Low expectations will... And I personally think it's very central.
I can use 3 words that are descriptors. And the first of those is the rigor of instruction that's observed and what's expected. The second word is differentiation of instruction, so that the instructional approach in classrooms differentiates instruction to fit the needs of each child. That's an instructional strategy that's very important. And the third component there is active engagement of children. So it is an instructional approach to managing classrooms that you look for. And in terms of the low expectations, I think what you oftentimes see in schools that serve a very high population of disadvantaged children is that building-wide climate, the expectations are lower. There are people who care about kids. There are people who really care about what they're doing, but that those buildings can fall into a climate of low expectations and not expecting and providing that differentiated, rigorous, student-engaging curriculum, and that's what we look for in these schools.
So if I can interject here. So I think, if I could dare to sort of pull on the thread that Ms. Kim has started here, I think the fundamental question that needs to be answered is, we get that you got to this documenting there are low expectations in the school from what you observed in instruction. I think there's another level. I think the question is there another level of one-on-one interaction to determine the cause of that? So that's the, objective observer seeing that you're teaching to a lower set of standards or the quality of all of those things that you mentioned. And so the question becomes really, why? Is it because that individual teacher does not believe that more can be accomplished? Or they're just trying to get through the day and trying to recognize some small successes maybe even for the benefit of that student? Because there's some things that you can teach and change, and there's some things you can't. And if I fundamentally believe that I'm in this school and because of the profile and the demographics, this is the best I'm ever going to get, I don't know what you do with that. So I think that's the question Ms. Kim is trying to get to, is what's the next step in determining the cause of what was objectively observed, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Well, there are some next steps. Number one, you have to have leadership, instructional leadership in the school. The leader of the school has to understand this and has to promote this and expect this and hold teachers accountable for that level of instruction in schools. And then we have to hold teachers accountable. And so that means that and the answer, if people don't believe in setting high expectations for children, then they really don't need to be there. And so we have to make decisions like that. And that's why the fundamental approach in this turnaround is centered on leaders who can turn schools around and high-performing teachers. We have a lot of them in our schools. Let's don't acknowledge the fact that we have some great teachers in a lot of our schools, but not enough. And when you're developing turnaround strategies for low-performing schools, you can't have any that aren't effective in turnaround strategies. No child who is behind can survive teachers that do not have excellent teaching skills and set high expectations for children. So that's what we're trying to build with our human capital strategy.
Okay.
And a lot of professional development. And if you look at those school improvement plans, you'll see a common theme in those school improvement plans of professional development, and that's reading and literacy, from reading and literacy, support and instruction, to use of instructional coaches, to a number of other instructional strategies that are extremely important, and support systems in those schools. And I want to mention one other thing that's really important too. It's not just about academics, and Tony's getting ready to talk in just a minute. Dr. Majors is getting ready to talk about our community schools effort, but we have to have the social and emotional supports for children in these schools also. That's another component.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Gentry, you nailed it on the head. I just want to double click on the idea that it seems so critically important. It's like a first principle. Like, the belief has to be there. If you have the right mindset, then you will develop the skill. You will seek to build a team around you of fellow educators, your principal, neighbor, whoever can help you to make your mission possible. And it seems to me like I'm guessing, like, if you dig down and look for root causes, like Dr. Gentry was saying, it's going to vary. And what I worry about is very surface level interventions for what is something that is like, you think on the surface this is actually the cause, and we haven't really dug down to figure out the root. And so if we don't look at the root, we're not going to actually solve the real problem. I mean, I'm very hopeful that, in fact, like I remember when I was teaching, it's like, I think I'm pretty good until you see Ms. Williams teach. And you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I have to reformulate everything. And continually, the envelope keeps getting pushed across the country. I was just in Denver. Witnessed some just truly spectacular instruction and was thinking, and I've been in it for 20 years, and that gave me a whole new sense of possibility. I was like, well, if these guys can do it, and they're like half my age, then anything is possible. And so part of it is are we giving for that subset of people for where it's a skill thing, or they just haven't seen what truly spectacular, instruction looks like, then can we expose them? you know? And I've seen all different levels, and it does vary, we know this, and sometimes just seeing it, it's just like, it makes, I was like, I'm a believer all over again. Like, anything is possible. When you see something just so beautiful like that, but you need the exposure, and so I would hope that for that subset of people, it's like we are just inundating them with that kind of exposure, because I think our people can rise to the challenge. But then if that's not the case, then we get to the root, you know. Yeah, that's, if it's a different thing, it's a different thing.
We might want to try to recruit some of those Denver teachers.
Yeah, no kidding, I've got note to self, we need to bring on, yeah.
Ms. Shepherd, I'm going to put this back in just a minute. Too many buttons on the screen. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to piggyback a little bit off Dr. Brannon. And Dr. Registrar, I think you said that you had 96 applicants had made the cut, and then 25 of those had made the first round of 3 phases. Right. Are any of those current leaders in these 12 schools?
2.
So here's a hard question. What do we do with the teachers that we're going to, and leaders that we're going to remove from those schools if they're not getting it done for these schools? What are we going to do with them?
Well, that's the answer to that is specific to each individual teacher. It depends on the skill, the strengths and weaknesses of the teacher. It depends on the tenure status of the teacher. So there's not a plan to just move everybody to another place and to reassign them across the district or anything like this. The plan's two-phased. One is to try to build the strengths of people who are showing weaknesses. Let's give them every support we can pull out. We expect our leaders in our schools to do that, but then to plan opportunities for them to be successful either in another job in education or outside of education.
I misspoke, there were 3.
3.
All
right,
3 leaders.
So we've got many more excellent administrators in our district than 3, but they didn't apply.
Okay.
It's hard work.
Yeah, it is.
So, ready?
Anything else on this topic? All right, Community Achieves.
Community Achieves. Dr. Majors is going to give you an update, and a lot of this is in response to questions that Ms. Frog raised at one of our last meetings. So, Tony, we'll turn it over to you. In a minute.
Thank you. While we're waiting on the screens to come up, I don't want to miss the opportunity to capitalize on some of the conversation that's already taken place. First of all, Ms. Kim, I want to start with everything that you've just said. If you enter into this work with a burning belief that all students can be successful and there needs to be high expectations and high levels of support and the community needs to be engaged in that work, then you believe in the community schools model. That is exactly what it says. That's exactly what it strives to do. Mr. Heibenrich, who I know is gone, but who's a member of the East Nashville Advisory Council, he is absolutely correct in the belief in the school council to work with principals and teachers to develop support structures and help lead the mission of that school. That is a key component to the community schools model. The principal is not the only one making decisions. It's informed by community members. It's informed by parents and teachers and other nonprofit and for-profit organizations that want to work with the schools and believe that they can make a difference in the academic performance and social development of all of our children. So it's just a great segue to what I'm going to talk about. Dr. Register did ask me to present just a brief overview of where we are with Community Achieves, why we feel it's important, and sort of where we're going as a school district. Ms. Bobo, I believe, has already passed out the PowerPoint for you, so I don't intend on reading every slide word for word, so I just want to hit some of the high points with you and then leave some time for questioning at the end. So the first question is why Community Achieves? And I have to first start with recognizing my colleagues, Dr. Steele, Mr. Carr, and Ms. Thompson. They've done an unbelievable job the last couple of years with looking at teacher quality, leadership development, online technology. All those things are moving at a swift pace in our district and in a very great place because of their efforts. performance. The one area we've not made the same type of investment is in social-emotional development, school climate and culture, as well as the community support systems that are available in Nashville and can be implemented at greater levels in our school system. Of course, local and national trends do point to the fact that true school reform takes place not just in instructional settings. There are other factors that must be considered when we look at improving our schools and improving the performance of our individual children. And then Nashville itself is really blessed. I mean, we have an abundance of nonprofit and other agencies that are willing to work with the school system, that have proven track records, and we want to engage them in a more meaningful way moving forward. Our community is looking for ways to address these issues. As Dr. Register has had his community meetings and faculty meetings, we've heard it over and over again. Everyone recognizes that we're putting a great deal of emphasis on instructional development, but they're all calling for the same thing. How do we support our children that walk into our classrooms with a wide array of needs that right now are not being satisfied, they're not being met? Our community schools model seeks to do that. And then pretty much what is Community Achieves? Community Achieves is a district-led initiative to support the development of full-service community schools through the alignment of support services, not just in our school system, but in our community as a whole. I did include a little bit of research data for you, which can be found on page 3. This is the Making the Grade research study that was released this past February. And pretty much it just talks about the fact that disparities exist prior to a child ever entering into formal education. That the issues that affect children are not just instructional, but they deal with health, social-emotional development, and many other factors. The Community Achieves structure focuses on 4 areas: college and career readiness, parental engagement, social services, and health and wellness. So we built our structure based on national best practices, and our partnerships are developed based on the identified needs of the school, but within one of those 4 pillars. So we are very much in line with national best practices of what they say is necessary to reform education. The next page really just talks about the National Coalition of Community Schools. It is our parent organization. They are partnered in Washington, D.C., and they work with individual schools and school systems nationally that are interested in implementing the community schools model. Now, I always start with a disclaimer when we talk about community schools. Number one, immediately they say the benefits. Sorry, I was just going on. You may want to stay because I'll forget to click. They always point to the fact that reduced chronic absenteeism, improved attendance, improved student performance, and improved behavior are the intended outcomes in implementation of the community schools model. But I always say I do not attribute improved academic performance solely to a community schools model, because you still have all of the academic supports, all the extended learning supports, everything that goes into instructional development, leadership, teacher quality, and extended opportunities instructionally are supported through the community schools model. It's a support structure, and it's an alignment structure, and it's one that's proven to be very successful. The next slide really talks about the impact of community schools, so I did want to cite information that's provided from individual school systems or schools that have implemented the community schools model and some of their outcomes. So we'll start with City Connects in Boston. You do see that they had increased 3rd grade performance and report card grades, but also in math scores in the 3rd grade. Middle school grades also saw an increase in math, as well as performance on the standard state assessments on reading and language arts. In addition, lowered chronic absenteeism and increased participation in non-instructional out-of-school time activities, which very much aligns with Dr. Steele's desire to have all middle school prep students engaged in an extracurricular activity. So we're trying to support the multiple initiatives here in the district through our work with our community schools model. If you look at the community learning centers in Cincinnati, they were the first urban district in Ohio to receive the effective rating and is the highest performing urban district in the state. Their high school graduation rate increased in 2000 from 51% to 83%, and they decreased the achievement gap for African American students when compared to white students from 14.5% in 2003 to 4.3% by 2009, 6 years. So it was very intentional about the services provided, interventions provided for minority students, and closing the achievement gap. But of course, we always love numbers. So the next slide does look at some of our quantitative outcomes. You can read for yourself what Clark Elementary did in Tulsa, particularly in math, where they improved the number of students scoring advanced from 26% to 46%, satisfactory from 35 to 38, and decreased the number of students scoring unsatisfactory from 11 to 4% during the timeline to which they implemented the community schools model. In the blue box, if you'll just look at the timeline, this is, I can't see because the box is too blue. But it is a school in Chicago, and they began implementing the community schools model in 2003. If you look at their students scoring satisfactory or at grade level, in 2002, 35% of their students scored satisfactory or at grade level. By 2007, they increased that number to 68.4%. So a substantial increase in the number of students scoring proficient or advanced or at grade level. Our plans to expand Community Achieves are very simple. It has never been my desire to have 153 full-service community schools. I don't think it's needed in Nashville. Our goal has always been to have 2 to 3 per cluster, depending upon need, and then individual schools that may self-select. So in the blue box for step 1, it's the first cohort of schools. Originally there were 19 that expressed interest in becoming a full-service community school. 14 continued with the work. At this point, Alignment Nashville has released an ITP, or an invitation to participate, for the majority of these schools, depending on are they at the readiness level to invite partnerships in the formal process. They are currently being supported by Allison McArthur here, who is our Community Achieves coordinator in my office, but they're also being supported by our external evaluator, who is working with us to actually compile the data, work with the schools to identify their needs, and then we'll also help the schools in compiling that data at the end to make sure that we are showing progress. One component of this model that I think is very successful for us is that we do cohort grouping in data warehouse. So if we have 30 students that are working with a particular company on a very particular intervention, we will group those kids in data warehouse, and we will track their performance and compare to students that did not have the intervention. So we are using data to support and to observe and to measure effectiveness. Step 2 is with our priority schools. So each of our priority schools will now be using the community schools model to help identify their needs and develop partnerships to help meet those needs. We have already secured additional staffing with the increased service hours in social work and the addition of STARS counselors to most of our priority schools. They will be in place, hopefully all in place by the end of this month, and most of our STARS counselors will come in trained in YTRI, restorative practices, as well as bullying intervention. And we'll be prepared to go in and start providing services immediately. The third cohort, or the third step, will be our next cohort of schools. We don't anticipate any more between 4 to 8 schools have expressed an interest in becoming a full-service community school. So moving forward, we'll be working with them to determine if it's if they want to go through this process and then begin conducting the needs evaluation and then going through the process of becoming a full-service community school. And then step 4. Step 4 is where I really think the board action is really important. And I think it's very simple. Number 1, if we want to do a full-service community school model as part of our district's turnaround strategies, we need to invest in it. Right now, the only investment that we're making, monetary investment, is for Ms. McArthur and the external evaluation, and that is right now done through grant funding. So we do need to make a local investment. But it's not appropriate to have that type of a discussion now because we're getting ready to enter the budget cycle anyway. The next thing is the prioritization. I think one of the most important things we can do as a school system is say, we recognize that our children need additional needs, that need additional assistance, that there are things that are non-instructional that we need to address as a school system. The prioritization from you as a board that this work is important will go a long way with our work, but also go along with our community to say we recognize the fact that we have to go beyond traditional instruction to meet the needs of our students in our schools. And that would be the final step, just a prioritization from the board and then the funding. The next is how do we help schools with implementation? And this is more or less Allison, and it's everything that I've already said. It's identifying a need, completing the needs assessment, having the partners meetings, completing the interest inventories, doing the data tracking, doing the evaluation. That is all done right now by Allison with the assistance of the site coordinators that are currently at the schools. But we don't have a dedicated site coordinator. So when I say add a site coordinator, I mean a dedicated person just to do this work. Right now, it may be a dean, an administrator, it may be a guidance counselor who's trying to do the work on top of their other responsibilities. And then last is the ask. So again, I don't want to get into a deep discussion about budget at this point in time, but I did want to provide you with some numbers. The numbers that you see are to fully fund, the best practice model. One site coordinator plus professional development and everything else that goes into program implementation. And of course, in order to do that, it's a $2.1 million investment. But I do have to say that around the country, this is done multiple ways. Some districts fund their site coordinators over other positions. Some districts rely very heavily on outside partners. So in Nashville, so I'm going to use Antioch High School as an example. The Family Resource Center manager at Antioch High School is Community Chief Site Coordinator. Still sharing duties, not doing it at the level completed that we would want it to be done, but the addition or supplemental of some assistance there would be very meaningful. So the opportunity does exist to lower this monetary amount by finding innovative ways to implement the model. But again, we still have to make an investment, and a pretty substantial one, if we want to see this come to fruition as a district strategy. And then I'd like to end with, why it's the right time for Nashville. This is not research-based. This is just me. This is just something that was important to me, so I do want to read it. Our school system is positioned to make whole school reform a reality. Due to our work in the areas of social and emotional learning, community engagement, discipline disparities, business partnerships, and extended learning, the foundation has been set to implement Education 2018 effectively. All that is needed is the prioritization of wraparound services to address the non-instructional needs of our students, schools, and communities. I think we're there. I sincerely believe that. We have to prioritize it, we have to make the investment, and continue to move forward with the work. So I honestly feel that our community agencies are ready and would be appreciative to us reaching out to them and say, educating the children of Nashville is more than just the responsibility of our school system. Everyone else can play a part as well. And now it's time for questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Spearing.
Yes, Tony, thank you for that presentation. That was very helpful. My question is, we have 14 community achieved centers right now, and out of those 14, how many right now are full service?
Right now, I would say one would be full service by national standards. There are probably an additional, well, I'll take that back. 1, 2, I think right now probably meet national standards, and both will be applying for the national recognition this spring. There are an additional 2 that I think are probably getting closer than others. Some have not had the ITP released because, to be honest with you, the person that's leading the work at the building has not had the opportunity to devote the time to everything that goes in prior to the partner release. So that's where we are right now.
So for $2.1 million, we could bring all 14 to that status of full service?
The $2.1 million is for 30. It would be for the 14 existing, an expansion of 4 to 8 plus all 8 of our priority schools for that dollar amount. That would provide one site coordinator plus professional development training and some of the outside consulting as well as evaluation funding that's required.
Great, thank you.
Any other question?
Yes. I have one. Go ahead.
Dr. Brown.
Yes. Of these 14 centers, is each of the clusters capable of servicing?
No, at this time we do not have system-wide cluster representation because the first round was self-selecting. So only principals that wanted to go through the process were engaged in the first cohort of schools. It was always a goal to have 1 to 2 per cluster. But I don't want to force something like this because it takes the commitment of the administration for everything that you just said, Ms. Kim, about that whole culture of expectations to facilitate this work. So this is not something I want to tell a principal they have to do.
At some point, could you give us the information on the cluster that is not serviced?
Yes, ma'am.
Or the clusters that are not serviced?
And I can email that to Ms. Bobo and she can get it out. We have the list.
Thank you.
Ms. Pierce.
I'd love the list of schools. If you could just get us all 30 schools where you envision this. And this is annually 2.1? Would it be recurring?
Yes, but we could, after the first 2 years, I would suggest reductions in some of the professional development and things like that, because once they've been trained, I don't think we'd have to have the same level of support in terms of professional development.
But would you want to grow the 30 schools?
I think it really depends on where we want to go as a system, but also the desires of the principals. At some point, you do get to a capacity issue of do you have enough nonprofit and for-profit organizations in the city capable of working in a school setting that can do the work in a meaningful way. For Nashville, again, I don't think we need all of our schools to be full-service community schools, but I do think we need access to service in all of our clusters. So to me, the maximum goal is always 2 to 3 per cluster.
Ms. Brogue.
So
I just want to say, I want to follow up on what Ms. Kim said, and I agree. I think that we do have to have very high expectations for all the students. I think we all have to believe that all children can learn. We have to have excellent leaders, great instruction, great teachers, all these things. But to me, this is a really important piece of the puzzle that we're missing. And, I think we're making some real headway on, improving instructional quality, on implementing social emotional learning, on recruiting great teachers, great leaders. But all of the research points to the negative impact of poverty on learning. And there was a recent Nashville Business Journal article that came out that said chronic poverty is urban Nashville's biggest issue. And that article talked about how poverty's grown here over the last few decades. And of course, the percentage of poverty in our schools has continued to rise because those are the kids that we're serving. At 1970, there were 16 high poverty census tracts in Nashville. In 2010, there were 32. Those living in poverty in Nashville has grown from 26,000 to 40,000, and that's over the last few decades. So, we've got to meet these children's basic needs in order for them to be able to succeed. And I think, we talk about this a lot, but we won't be able to do it until we really fund this program. We've talked about it for a couple of years. We've got to get the funding in place. And I think it's also important that it has to be a piece of the puzzle. We have to be doing all these other great things, but we also have to make sure that we are implementing these services with fidelity and not just piecemealing them or this will not work. And one other point I wanted to make is I think this fits in very nicely with some of our new initiative for community engagement. I think that, we've been talking about such things as longer school hours, bringing parents into schools, bringing nonprofits and businesses and other partnerships into our schools. And so this is really a great way to do that. You're offering that opportunity for families and for community members to be a bigger part of the school. So I'd like to kind of think about, as we move forward with community achieve, think about how we can have that fit in with our community engagement work that we're already doing. And then, so I have one question, and my question is, I know that you did a lot of this work at Glencliff, and it would be interesting to see how it actually, the impact it made here in Nashville. So I'm curious if you have quantifiable results from your time as a principal there.
Yeah, well, that was a few years ago, but off the top of my head, when I took over at Glencliff when we first started implementing the community schools model, our graduation rate was roughly 62%. I believe when I left, we were at 78 to 82%. We had the highest gains in the district, and Jay, you'll have to help me remember this one. I think we had the highest gains in Algebra 1 my last year with a 21% gain on the Algebra 1 assessment. We always only had marginal gains in English, reading and language arts. That was heavily attributed to our high concentration of English language learners who were required to take the assessment at that point in time. But even with our ELL population, I do believe we had, on average, had 1 to 3% gain in reading language arts. Of course, we were in the bottom 5 in the state at the beginning, and then the year after my departure, Glencliff High School was in good standing. And of course, all the other indicators were there. Improved performance, improved daily attendance, substantial improvement in the number of community partners engaged in the work at Glencliff, and that commitment still continues with some of the partnerships that are still ongoing. And I do want to follow up on something else that you did say. So in a lot of the research that you'll see nationally, you'll hear it over and over again, equity. Everything that you just spoke to is equity. Poverty has a direct implication on equity, resources to support the children and families have. The community schools model is very dependent upon addressing the equity gap that exists for all families because of poverty.
So I do have a question. So I thought where we were going with the question about quantifiable data would be a little more recent. So with regards to the schools that have operated under the Community Achieves model, I think you referenced being able to put some things on the dashboard or in the data warehouse. Has that already been done? Can we get some before and after?
Now I have to get Allison to answer that question for you. Where are we on pulling cohorts of students by school?
That's something new for this year, to put students in cohorts, so we can pull that information and compare if they're in a program or working with a partner, what does their attendance, discipline, and grades look like in comparison to the rest of the school.
So we have the data, we just need to...
We haven't pulled it. We have just entered those students in this semester.
Okay.
So we would have to pull it.
So it'd be more meaningful to pull it later in the year after
Right.
they've had time to go through the intervention.
Okay.
I want to address the question about clusters. We're in 9 of 12 clusters right now. We're not in Overton, Hillwood, or Hillsborough. That was a question earlier.
My brain was going the same place as you, Dr. Gentry. So I'm very interested in the data, because when we talk about scaling up and investing more, we just want to make sure that's the right investment given limited resources. Meanwhile, we know that there are 13 schools on our own APF that are both high performing, as labeled by us, across many metrics, and who are serving a high economically disadvantaged population. 13 schools. And so I am sort of dying to overlay, that's the evidence. Like, we've got 13 schools who are just hitting out of the ballpark for kids who are coming to school with a lot of disadvantages that you described, and they're somehow figuring it out. They're meeting the needs, and so I would love to know, what are they doing? I think it'd be good for this board to know, because that is the proof. They're making it happen, and there's probably a lot to learn, and it's a mix of all different kinds of schools. But if they were to sit down as a group and say, okay, this is the quickest way, because we know that, right? Like, education is the way out of poverty. It's the step up the ladder, and so it seems like if they're able to make it happen and to give the education that we want, there's a lot to be learned from them. Conceptually, by the way, I love these ideas. So this is not to say it's not in support of what you just presented, just to be clear. But when we talk about scaling up too, I just want to make sure we're picking the very best set of total interventions. And I am very eager to hear how the first cohort is doing. It sounds promising. It seems like intuitively that would be the right set of things to do, but I would like to see
on
the
the
data.
cohorts, I'd like to add, so out of the 14 schools, the number of cohorts range anywhere from 1 cohort of students to 20. So you can imagine that the cohort with 1, I met with the principal yesterday, she has a part-time person that works 10 hours a week doing her coordinating. So you can imagine she doesn't have the number of cohorts that the school that has 20 cohorts, because they have a person, an outside agency is funding that position, and so there's a person that's full-time coordinating. So that makes a difference in what our schools look like.
And I will say something, I'm going to go back to what I said in the previous presentation. We know that attention to wraparound services and supports for schools work. As I said earlier, I can't give you a quantifiable number to say if we implement it's going to increase math scores by 5%. I can't do that. But I can say it will positively impact the conditions for learning in that building. I can say that going back to the formation of the I-Zone, 3 of the schools that were working with us on community achieves at various levels rolled off the list and are in good standing. Antioch High School is probably at the highest degree next to Cole, to Mr. Pinkston's concerns about English language learners. Cole has been one of our highest performing community achieve schools for years, and they have a very high ELL population. Antioch High School is a reward school, and they are probably the best at implementing. If I was to make a decision today of saying who is our flagship for community schools model, it's Antioch High School today.
So I have another question. So just to understand the premise behind the questioning is, earlier in this year, we wanted to be data-driven. We've been pushing it, and we think we've been doing a great job of becoming data-driven. So I think the ask from a budget perspective would have to be, right now the data is purely anecdotal. So we have to appreciate that at this point we're talking about that we fundamentally believe it's the right thing to do is have those wraparound services available. And so I think we need to spend some time thinking through what that funding for next year looks like. I would say that I would need to see something documented that helps me understand how we're going to track from day one. to understand what the return on whatever the investment turns out to be. We can't continue to move forward in that vein with any of the initiatives that we approve, not just Community Achieves, whether it's in the EL space. What we're funding has to be measurable. We have to be diligent and intentional about validating that what we're spending is getting us the results that we expect to get. So on the expect part of it, the other thing I would like to see is, and I know it's a little difficult, but what are the balls with regards to a dashboard we're attempting to move? Is it we're looking to see an X% reduction in chronic absenteeism? We're trying to see an X% increase for that cohort in their algebra test scores or their reading and reading and English scores. Somehow we have to understand the why, and again, other than it being the right thing to do, what is it that we hope to see, and what is the benefit and the value to those, even those community partners that we're asking to invest as well. So I think the next steps for this, as we lead into the budgeting space, and not to speak for Ms. Shepherd, from my perspective, and I think others, would be to understand how are we measuring the impact of the investment, and what are the expected outcomes of the investment.
I would like to say that I think this is a good place for us to spend money on our children because it puts children first. But I would also like to piggyback off of Ms. Kim saying that we should collaborate with some of our schools around the city of Nashville in spreading those best practices, as well as looking out to other districts that are doing great things. So, but I do say that if we're going to spend our money, if our budget is going to be huge, I think spending it on our children is extremely important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Madam Chair, that concludes the director's report.
Thank you, Dr. Register. We'll move into our brief and succinct. Is my mic on? Our succinct committee reports. We'll start with Ms. Spearing with Teaching and Learning.
Thank you. We had a Teaching and Learning Committee meeting on January the 7th to discuss integrated math and district turnaround capacity. Integrated math brings together the interrelationships between Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry, so that each year the children are getting a part of all of those three disciplines. MNPS has received almost $1 million PD grant to support the implementation of integrated math, which is used by high-performing countries. And the implementation will take 3 years to complete. The professional development will begin this spring with an introductory online PD class, and then this summer there will be a 2-week face-to-face PD scheduled for June. The district has hired a turnaround specialist called Mass Insight, which we approved tonight, and they will begin, I think, tomorrow. Is that right? By completing a diagnostic of the district. They will analyze the culture, the management, the academics, and operational practices for our priority schools, and develop a plan for improvement. One staff member from Mass Insight, at least one, I guess, will be here in residence for the next 2 months, and Dr. Register will give us an updated report on that at a meeting soon. Our next meeting for Teaching and Learning will be in 2 weeks on January the 28th from 11:30 to 1 in the boardroom, conference room. Lunch will be provided, and we will be talking about response to intervention in our comprehensive reading initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spearing. Ms. Shepherd, capital needs.
It can be shorter than that. We had a capital needs and got some updated numbers right prior to our board meeting tonight. We will have our last scheduled capital needs budget meeting on Tuesday, the 27th. As a committee, we'll vote on that budget, and then we'll bring it to the board floor for approval from the board. And I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Pinkston, Community Engagement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On Monday, January 5th, we had a Community Engagement Committee meeting. This is a new committee that is still getting its legs. under it, but we had a robust discussion, talked about three topics. First, public opinion research, trying to continue the effort to establish a baseline of what the community believes about the school system and specific things that are happening and what people want to see happen in the future. We made a decision at that committee meeting to ask management and staff to undertake an inventory during the first quarter of this year about kind of what existing research do we have in hand already, both quantitative and qualitative, and from there make some determinations about what additional public opinion we might want to go look at, particularly through qualitative research such as focus groups. Second thing we discussed was the potential establishment of what we are casually, loosely referring to in the committee as a public engagement loop, which would be a highly structured series of steps that the board and the district would undertake whenever big decisions hit the radar. And we're still trading back and forth with management and staff on ideas, and we'll continue that discussion at the next meeting. Also, for further discussion will be new potential protocols and procedures for board members to communicate directly with our constituents. So we're still looking at ground rules and opportunities for how to do that effectively and efficiently. Next committee meeting will be Monday, February 2nd at the Martin Center for Professional Development, 2400 Fairfax Avenue, Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkston. Under board chairs reports, we're going to go with announcements. Starting on Ms. Hunter's end, do you have anything? Dr. Brannon? Ms. Spear?
Yes, thank you. As a byproduct of my work on the Comprehensive Literacy Committee, which I was honored to be invited by Dr. Register to serve on that committee, I attended today a Read 180 and System 44 Summit. And I've got to hear about struggling adolescents and at middle school and in high school, and it was really fabulous. I know we all share a common vision for improving literacy attainment for all of our students, and we know that all subsequent learning is built on literacy. So it's very exciting to see what we're doing and the support that we're giving our teachers for literacy through middle school and high school. And the data on that looks really good as well. If you have never seen a reading recovery lesson, there will be an opportunity on January the 29th at 3:30. I think Jay will be there. And that will be at Martin Professional Development Center, where we will be able to see two different lessons of a student, a struggling student, learning how to read in a 30-minute lesson. You'll see the two lessons will be very different. And it's really a phenomenal experience to see it right in front of you and to hear the comments of the teachers as they are observing the lesson, as they relate the theory to practice. It's wonderful. And last but not least, T.J. Williams today shared with me that Firestone, Maplewood now will be called the Firestone Training Center. It is the first one in the world. This will happen on Friday, I understand, and all of the students who graduate from that program will be ASE certified. So congratulations to TJ. And
thank you. Thank you. Ms. Shepherd?
I do have a couple. Last Tuesday night, a week from tonight, we had our FAFSA night at McGavock High School. I want to say a huge thank you to Deloitte and John George for organizing that. We helped over 175 students complete this necessary step to attending college. Over 522 people attended, which included students, families, and volunteers and educators. So this is Deloitte's 5th year in helping with this initiative, and they do a really good job, and we're very appreciative at McGavock for that. And just as a reminder that the cluster parent advisory council meetings will be held this coming Thursday, and the McGavock cluster meeting will be at DuPont Hadley Middle Prep at 5:30 in the library.
Thank you. Ms. Kim? Mr. Pinkston?
Yeah, just one announcements. This will take a couple of minutes. As we heard during tonight's presentation, we've got real resource allocation needs for programs and initiatives like Community Achieves, and yet very finite resources. So tonight I'm bringing a notice that at a future meeting in the near future, I intend to bring a motion that would call for a moratorium on new schools of any type, charter, magnet, traditional, or other, until, and that's the key word here, until we have a plan for how we intend to close a projected $22 million budget gap that we're facing in the 2015-16 fiscal year. As you all will recall, our current and previous operating budgets have relied on back-to-back use of fund balance, our cash reserves. What that means is that we now have $22 million in non-recurring funds matched to recurring expenditures, and anyone who has been around governmental budgeting knows that that's a no-no, at least for an extended period of time. In the most simple terms, we have been using our savings account to pay the mortgage, and the fund balance has now dwindled to a level in which we cannot keep doing that and be fiscally responsible. So to put it in perspective, that $22 million is equivalent to about 25% of the taxpayer funds that were generated by the last property tax increase in 2012 in Metro government. So this is real money that we're dealing with. And to use another budget analogy, I'm not inclined to just keep running up the credit card and send the bill on to our colleagues in the council. So I would like to ask management to bring us a plan for how we're going to fill that $22 million hole, whether that's extracting or asking for an early commitment from the mayor to recommend significant amount of new revenue for schools in the next budget cycle, or whether that's cutting back elsewhere in the school system, starting with the central office or some combination of both. Let's take some time, perhaps, Madam Chair, Budget Chair, perhaps dive deeper in committee, but if we can't hammer out a plan for closing that budget gap, then I see no responsible path forward except for a temporary moratorium on new schools. That's my intent, and I look forward for additional conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pierce?
I want to congratulate Hillsborough High School senior Alex Jolly, who was recently named the Intel Science Talent Search semifinalist. Intel is the nation's most prestigious pre-college science talent search, and we're proud of Alex for winning that recognition.
Thank you. Ms. Frogue? Thank you. So I just want to wish everybody, kind of late, I know, Happy New Year. I'm here on January the 13th as we go into the second half of the school year. Just two things I want to say very briefly. One is that we know that this coming Monday is MLK Day. Got that right? Yeah. And so I hope that you all will just search the internet. There's lots of websites that will give you a laundry list of activities and events that are happening across the city to recognize this day. It is a day off for almost everybody when it comes to work, but it is an opportunity to provide service to this community, which, as we all know, was a very much so a hotbed of activity during the civil rights movement. And there's lots of history here. So even if it's just going to the Nashville Library and taking a tour through the Civil Rights Room and looking through some of those exhibits to gain a greater appreciation for not only the things that we have accomplished in this city and in this country, but to gain an appreciation for so much that is left to do. Because I am not one that believes that the dream has been realized across the board, and that speaks directly to the comments that we've had at this board table with regards to equity. The second thing is just an analogy that came to me as we awarded, I believe it was Mr. Davis and Ms. Cruz, yeah, I can't read my own handwriting, thank you, around their heroic efforts in helping the student in her time of need. You know, this is what our teachers do every day. They're literally saving lives by providing quality instruction, helping our students with a myriad of needs across the board, preparing them to be, as we prepared our vision statement, I will never forget Dr. Brandon holding on to that word of citizenry, that they're able to leave our schools and become productive citizens within this community, to care for themselves and care for families, to be productive, to feel that they have value and bring a value to the community in which they live. And so our teachers are saving lives every day within those classrooms with what they do for our students. And so I don't want us to ever forget that. Not everyone will get a commendation from the governor for that work, but I want you to know that we at this board table, as a board member, as board chair, as a parent of 2 Metro School students, we greatly appreciate all that you all do every day for our students. Be there no further business?
This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you. Must have hit this thing.